Hi, everyone. I'm Alaina Harkness. I'm currently the executive director of an organization called Current. And before that, I spent all of my career really trying to understand different ways of making cities work better for people and for the environment. That's kind of been my through line. I spent the first 10 years working in different capacities and foundations. I worked for our community foundation in Chicago, the Chicago Community Trust, where I staffed civic initiatives, working on kind of big transformational efforts there. And then I worked on urban development programs for the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, a large private foundation headquartered in Chicago, and did stints at policy research institutes after that and consulting on inclusive growth plans for cities. So I've been in my role leading this environmentally focused nonprofit for about almost 2 years. So I did not mean to start in philanthropy. I just kind of rolled out of graduate school into our community foundation. And like Kevin, the thing that I ended up loving about all of my jobs in philanthropy had nothing to do, I mean, like the money, giving out money, which is what everybody thinks is amazing about philanthropy. Like you get to write checks, you're like giving out, making people's dreams come true. That was like my least favorite part. My favorite part was the network building and being able to sort of surf at a 30,000 foot view on whatever topic I cared about, to be able to see connections that people working deeply couldn't, because they're working deeply. They're really like every day out there building their organization, doing their thing. And some of the biggest value you can add as someone in the foundation space, whether it's a community foundation, or a big private foundation or a family office, is to be able to help create those connections among the people that all share so many common goals. I mean, I was listening to all the organizations today that are kind of, pitching to be chosen, and there's so many shared goals there. So being able to be a conduit for that, a connector, a broker, that's what still excites me about the space. And now I'm thinking of all these, it's like a cascade of mistakes. It's like a highlights reel, lowlights reel playing in my mind. So I think this might be in particular a challenge if you are a local funder, a locally embedded funder. But I think one of the biggest sort of mistakes, and it was kind of a long-term relational mistake, was getting much too close and much too involved to a particular grantee who I really cared about the mission. We had been kind of part of starting up the organization. And just that nearness, that investment over time, being part of the board, just really, really wanting to get involved every time there were, what I saw as like mistakes or missteps. Just over time, that's a hard relationship to manage. And there wasn't one clear outcome of the mistake. I just think it is a potential pitfall, trying to maintain the professional distance of, you're an investor, you're not the executive director, you're not necessarily a board member, although sometimes foundation program officers do take board seats. But just being mindful of those dynamics, it's difficult. We're all passionate about the work. You're in this because you care. And I think that can be sometimes a challenge. I had a boss, I think the generalized problem or failure, I had a boss that said any foundation with program officers that are allowed to fund their own ideas has fools for program officers, or something like that. I'm probably remembering exactly how I said it, but I think I said this in my response to the questions in the book. You can also start to really feel like you know a lot about the field and you have a lot to offer, and you do. But delivering that knowledge in a way, I think to Anne's point about, people will try to do what you say. If you've got a great idea, everyone thinks your idea is great if you're a program officer. So being really careful how you share your observations about what's a good idea and what might work, I think is a really big responsibility. One of the things in my observation about the last 15 or so years in philanthropy is that, it reflects the same wealth pyramid and concentration of wealth, right? It's a small group of decision makers relative to the number of nonprofits that are out there that are the people that are beneficiaries. And because it's small, trends amplify really quickly, take hold quickly, and are really hard to shift. And I think we're in the middle of one of those right now that's really interesting and important. So for a long time, especially in large foundations, I think we're coming out of a time when strategic philanthropy and like designing your own high-level theory of change across the portfolio was a really big deal. Having clear metrics and like that was a big trend that rippled across a lot of the field. There's a big swing back coming to trusting foundations on the ground, trust-based philanthropy, listening to the priorities and needs that communities have. And I guess my caution about the whole thing is that there were really important things about thinking strategically about your portfolio of investments that are always going to be true. And there's always going to be really important things about listening carefully to groups on the ground and how their priorities are shifting, because they're nearer to them than you are. So I guess the word of advice that I have to carry forward as we have this major intergenerational wealth transfer coming is it's never going to be like one or the other. So if you think that if you're hearing that there's some big trend and some big swing, there's probably something really valuable there, and there's something really valuable on the other side, and there's maybe a middle way. And it's like really hard to blend those things, but yeah, data-driven was a big deal for a long time. Still is. It's important to have data, but not all things can be measured really effectively, and sometimes those are the most important places to put your money. So yeah, thinking about that. This, I think, is a great example of another one of those like either or swings where it's like we need pipelines of small arts organizations, educational organizations. We always will. We also need anchor institutions, and we always will. And I think we're seeing some interesting, like the Mackenzie Scott gifts recently. Many of them to very large anchor institutions, public universities, like in my hometown in Chicago, University of Illinois at Chicago, recipient of a very large gift. They are a rocket booster for economic opportunity for diverse populations all across our state. And it was amazing to see that kind of investment in an anchor institution, not because, it was not like a big flashy program. They're going to scholarships. That's where the money's going, $40 million, and most of it's going to scholarships to help, some of these are the, probably first kids in their families to get a 4-year degree. That's incredible. So yeah, just really thinking about the both and here and what opportunities there are in this big intergenerational wealth transfer moment to look across the portfolio of all the institutions we need.